Let's talk a minute about boundaries. It's hard to talk about well-being and it's hard to talk about stress management and self-care without talking about boundaries. The key here, I think, is that you want to manage your boundaries instead of having them manage you. I think a lot of times we hear in the popular press that we need really good boundaries. And so we think that there's one right answer to managing boundaries. I'm not going to start working until 8 and I'm at 5, I'm going to absolutely finish up. And those are my boundaries, by goodness. But it's actually really helpful if you're intentional about the porosity of your boundaries. If you're intentional about, gosh, when you might want to start early or when you want to burn some midnight oil because it's a really big project or it's a problem that you're solving, or when you want to knock off a little bit early because you want to go to your child or your niece or your nephew or your friend's soccer game, and then you're going to maybe turn back on later, or you're going to take some time off in a week and make it up in terms of getting the results that you need. When you are in charge of your own boundaries and when you're intentionally managing where you want those to occur, that's a very big deal. And intentionally managing your boundaries looks like thinking about your priorities and deciding, what's really most important to me and how does that contribute to the choices I'm making? Thinking about your relationships, which of those relationships are most important to you and how will you make choices as a result? And where are you feeling your identity? There's this beautiful example. I was working on my PhD and I did some interviews with leaders and talked to them about how they feel about kind of the work-life conundrum and the challenges that went along with it. And I'll never forget it. There was this senior most leader within an organization, a Fortune 100 organization. And she said, you know what? I have breakfast with my kids every single morning without fail. I never miss breakfast with my kids because that is when I feel most like a mom. And I just thought that was a really great story. Like with all the other things, she was really clear that that particular thing had importance for her, had unique meaning for her. And so your unique meaning and identity may come from other places, but it's really helpful to be intentional about understanding your priorities, your relationships, and your identity as you think about those boundaries. So here's a question for you. To what extent do you prefer firm versus porous boundaries? Maybe you prefer bright lines. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna stop working at this point and I'm not turning on until the next work day. That's totally cool. Maybe you prefer more porous boundaries. Maybe you never thought about it before. So just give that a minute of your own thought. I love this example. Someone said in a chat, we were talking about this question of boundaries, and he said, it depends on the person. For some people, my boundaries are very firm. For others, they're much more porous. And so your strength of relationship may drive as well your flexibility and the choices that you're making about your boundaries.